I have said that.
Welcome back. Now we'll start by taking a look at some of the stories on Daily Trust newspaper. And the lead story here talks about bandits' attacks and how 71 have been buried in Katsina communities, and more are still missing. 27 women kidnapped, and a lot of locals have actually left their communities due to these attacks. And the president and presidential candidate Atiku Abubakar also condemned the attack. You'd actually take a look at the infograph there. It talks about, what is happening in these communities and the number of communities and the affected communities all in Bakori local government area. It's actually really sad to know that despite, enormous efforts, at tackling these bandits attacks, even with the redesign of the new narrow notes, that these attacks are still ongoing.
Well, the numbers are quite alarming when you look at it, and despite the fact that prior to this there was a bit of a lull when it came to the activities of these bandits and came to the attacks, but they just came back with full force, and of course a lot of people. I mean, like 71 people buried at one particular time. I mean, like, it's a huge loss. It's a huge loss, and it's not something that you'd actually want to see occur on a regular basis. And I do hope that these people or these bandits will actually be stopped, so that these attacks can actually be curbed, and the people there can actually go back to living their lives, because they have not been living their lives for a very long time. Most of them have relocated. Lots of them have lost their lives. They've lost breadwinners. They've lost family members and loved ones as well. And we're even hearing that 27 women were kidnapped during the last attack. I mean, the numbers are really, really alarming.
Yes,
and we
indeed.
just hope that the security agencies can be able to do something about it.
And the sad thing is, this is actually not just happening in the north, because if you look at page 6 of Daily Trust, you'd find another story of 6 being killed and property even razed as gunmen attack Ondo villages, even despite the traditional rulers intervening on some of the challenges happening in Nigeria.
Yeah, well, the security situation is across the country. I mean, like, everywhere you go, they're facing one security challenge or the other, and the security agencies are doing their best. They're doing what they can, and for a very long time we saw a dip in these cases. Yeah, but they seem to be resurfacing here and there, and I think it's time for the security agencies to actually sit up again and see if they can be able to we're heading into an election. We're just a couple of days to the election, and I mean, people need to feel safe to go out and vote, because if I don't feel my safety is guaranteed, most likely a lot of people will not go out and vote, and that will affect the numbers, and at the end of the day affect the outcome.
Especially in communities that have already been threatened.
Exactly, in the first place.
Mm.
Exactly, because some people have actually living with that palpable fear that they will not be, their security will not be guaranteed when they come out to vote. So I think that is something that we really need to look at, especially now as we're heading towards the general election.
All right, now there's on in-depth, so that's on page 3 of Daily Trust. There's this Kingsley Maduike, Nigerian Research Coordinator for Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime, has actually said that tackling cattle rustling can check Nigeria's insecurity and boost the economy. Do you agree with this?
Well, cattle rustling, it can be the genesis of most of the bandit activities in the north can actually be traced to cattle rustling. Most of the things that actually most of these bandits started as people tried to take revenge or reprisal attacks because of their cattle that were actually rustled in the first place. So really, if you examine these things, you see cattle rustling is actually at the bottom of it. It's the root of the issue. So I think if we go, I don't know whether or not it will have the kind of effect that it would have had if it had been done prior to all this, because right now the problem has snowballed into something else, and I think it's gone beyond cattle rustling. I think a lot of these bandits take it to be a business now, and they're actually they're actually in it for the long haul. So I don't think it might have the kind of effect that it might have if it had been done previously prior to all of this, but it will go a long way. At least those herders that are in doing the legitimate businesses can have their cattle safe.
Okay. All right, so let's take a look at, this particular story on airlines blocked funds. And, quite an alarming number of people have actually lost their job. More than 721,000 people have lost their jobs. Even travel agents, are actually, scared over the $500 million, trapped funds. The aviation sector seems to be slowly going down the drain. A lot seems to be, happening in Nigeria. A lot seems to not be working in Nigeria.
Well, I was speaking to someone earlier about this, and he was like, what does he care? I mean, like, he doesn't travel, he doesn't board planes, so it's only that's a rich people problem. But that just puts into context what you've just brought up right now. I mean, there's a value chain when it comes to the aviation sector, like any other sector. There's a value chain that comes with it. There are people that actually work within this sector. If the sector is not working the way it's supposed to be, then there are lots of people who are going to suffer. Their families are going to go into distress. The number of people that lost their jobs because of what is going on in the aviation sector right now, it's alarming. And these are the ones that actually are directly affected. We're not talking about the ones that are indirectly affected, because all their family members are affected. Anybody that is a benefactor, that is benefiting from that particular person, has lost something, and he is affected as well. One person can actually be a benefactor to 10 or more people. All those people have been affected when you look at it. So it's not a question of saying that this is a rich person problem because there's only rich people to travel, but it has, the entire value chain has been affected. And if this goes on like this, then the aviation sector will go down the toilet and we will not be able to salvage it. And a lot of things will go wrong. A lot of people will lose their jobs, making an even difficult situation more difficult.
There seems to be a lot going on in politics as well, from the APC to the PDP Labour Party. We can't really, talk about everything happening. But then one thing that struck, or one story that actually struck on Inside Politics, is about how CDD wants lapses in mock accreditation addressed, saying beavers will eliminate identity theft. This is attributed to INEC. But a lot of people don't seem to, have 100% trust in the beavers, and if, the elections will be free and fair.
Well, actually, any piece of equipment, any piece of technology is only as good as the person operating it. People might not have a problem with the beavers particularly, but they might have a problem with the people operating it. How competent are those people? Do they actually have the capacity to do that? And what is the potential of those people, the probability of them being compromised? That is what people are afraid of. They're not actually afraid of the technology, they're afraid of how it's being deployed and who is deploying it. That is, I think, one aspect that hasn't been looked at, even by INEC itself. INEC is placing more emphasis on the machines, on how it can be able to work, its workability, how they can be able to put it in place for the elections. We're not talking about the personnel. We're not looking at those personnel. What are we doing to make sure that these guys are not compromised?
Background checks.
Exactly. What are we doing to make sure that these guys actually they have the capacity to operate this machinery? If they do, what is the probability of them being compromised? Because they can be, and they can be able to manipulate these things, because as I said earlier, it is only as good as the person operating it. So I think it's something that we really need to look at, and we're not giving it much attention as we want it. Of course, the BVAS can be used as a tool to stop election rigging, to be able to make sure that elections are credible, to ensure fairness when it comes to the system. But what about the people? Definitely people have to operate them, and those are the people that we need to work on.
All right, let's take a look at City and Crime page on pages 28 and 29. We have gunmen kidnap Abuja chief's wife, sons, 5 others, and demand 35 million naira and foodstuff as well. And we also have NRC suspends officials over Abuja-Kaduna derailment. There's a story on woman, teacher, others detained over 2 tons of drugs. Ritualist arrested with human skull in Niger. 3 killed as building collapses in Rivers State. Recently was the one in Abuja, and then we have one in Rivers State. POS operators buy new Naira notes from filling stations in Niger. I don't even understand how that works, but then we have 2 masquerades nabbed over attack on Lagos community. And a lot seems to be happening in Ogun State as well, as man is arrested for setting wife ablaze in Ogun, and a brother shoots his sister's boyfriend in Ogun State as well. You know, really, really sad one there. These are some of the happenings on city and crime.
Yeah, you realize that it's actually trouble when you have a newspaper dedicating 2 pages to whatever the crime happening everywhere, and we can see that by the nature of these stories. I mean, like, we have issues of fraud, you have issues of murder, you have issues of assault, attempted murder, racketeering. All these things are happening in different parts of the country, in different sectors, and it cuts across everybody. It's not that just it's a particular group of people that are, but crime is just crime. It's not ascribed to anybody. Nobody has a monopoly over it, and that is how it is. Unfortunately, what should I say? Our security agencies are doing their best, because we've seen some of those stories that people were arrested and people are being prosecuted, investigations being carried out, and the rest of it. Yes, more needs to be done if there's a need, because things are still spiraling out of control, but they're not way out of control that we cannot be able to bring them down. And I think our security agencies should sit up a little bit to be able to take up these challenges. Not that they're not doing a good job. Most of them are doing a fantastic job, and we can see the results elsewhere. Just a little more needs to be done.
Okay, so quickly, one more before we wrap up this particular segment. The Guardian lead story talks about fuel, Naira scarcity depletes productivity and worsens inflation. Even the Punch carried, you know, this as its lead story, saying Buhari is under pressure to end fuel and Naira disasters. Now, the whole idea, one benefit of the Naira redesign is to end inflation. Is this, whatever is happening now, are we seeing a storm before the calm? Because you go to some communities or some markets in the north, and they're actually selling at a loss already because there's Naira scarcity. You know, I actually got to experience it during the weekend. I couldn't actually buy fuel because I didn't have cash. And then you go to the filling stations, you want to buy fuel, but you have to queue to pay before you even buy. You don't even queue with your cards anymore. You queue with your card to pay and make sure that the transaction goes through before you're able to buy fuel.
So I'm not an economy expert or a money person, but I can only attest to the current crunch that's going on right now. If you have a situation whereby you go to the POS and you want to withdraw cash, and they're telling you that if you want to withdraw 10,000 naira,
they don't even have the cash.
You have to give them 3,000 for those who have it. You know, for every 10,000, you have to give 3,000 naira. I mean, it's appalling. It is. No matter what it is, this Naira redesign policy, whatever the end game is, whatever it is trying to achieve, at the present situation, people are not finding it funny. That is just the basic thing. You have money in the bank, you can't access it, you can't spend it. A couple of days ago, people tried doing transfers. Transfers were not going through. People were actually being debited. Money was not credited to where it was supposed to go. Some apps refused to even open because we don't have the infrastructure to do this. Are we ready for it? Probably not. We probably need a little more time before we can be able to say we can go cashless. Going cashless is fantastic. It's absolutely phenomenal, because there's nothing as good as you going to pay for goods and services with your card or sending an electronic transfer. You don't have to carry cash around. You understand? That is absolutely fantastic. But in a situation whereby the infrastructure is not there, the banks are not ready to go cashless, because they are the ones who actually they're the ones who develop these apps and look after them. And then you have a situation whereby you go to somewhere, probably in an emergency situation or something like that. You want to make, and you can't. You can't make an electronic payment because the bank application is down. So these are the kind of issues that we need to look at before we can be able to talk about going cashless. Just hope that this, and if this money is going to be made available, let it be made available, until we can go back to the drawing board, make sure the infrastructure is in place before we can actually launch and go into this thing the way we are supposed to do it.
All right. Well, I think with that, we've come to the end of the newspaper review.